Rice, CTO with Ratchet-Soft, and today I wanted to step you through using a new action pack that we've released called the Laserfiche Action Pack. This is a collection of assets that we have built and tested that perform a number of key operations against the Laserfiche content management system, including scan in place, doing searches directly from within the context of another application screen. So the focus of today's video is going to be actually how to wire it up. So I'm starting here at the Ratchet-X download page, and I've just downloaded vanilla Ratchet-X, and I'm going to now install the Laserfiche Action Pack and then show you how we would go about wiring up a sample application. So as you can see, Ratchet-X was just installed. It's sitting down here in the Windows system tray. It's completely blank. Ratchet-X has no assets yet. As the vanilla version, it comes without any knowledge of specific screens. We call those app spaces. And it has no knowledge of any specific actions that you can perform. Well, that's where the Laserfiche Action Pack comes in. Let me close this down and let's get started. I'm going to download and install the Laserfiche Action Pack from our website. To do so, I'm going to choose Tools, Install Action Pack, and you'll see a list come up of various action packs that are available. You're going to find, I think they're alphabetical, you'll find Laserfiche down here somewhere. And if you select that one, just click the Install button and it will download that action pack. If you're not sure, you can click this link and find out some more information about the action pack that you're interested in. So I'll click the Install button. And now Ratchet-X is downloading and installing a couple of key components, specifically an action file and an app space file, that are required for integrating with Laserfiche. I just want to point out it does pop up this dialog. Not all of our action packs do, but this one does. It pops up a little interim dialog that lets you know that you need to install something additional in order to get this to work. Now in this case, it is the Laserfiche SDK runtime. So to actually get this to work at runtime, you need to install a component from Laserfiche. Now this is not detecting whether it's currently been installed or not. This is just reminding you that there is this external dependency. If you want to know where to install all this, you would just click on this link. It'll bring you to a web page that has links to where you can download it and what it is and what it's all about. I'm going to skip it for now because I've already installed it. So now the only thing we've done is we have downloaded one action called the Laserfiche Action Pack Action, and we've downloaded one app space called Laserfiche Action Pack. These are two required files that need to be here in order to do any Laserfiche integrations. If you look at some of the more generic videos, I go into great detail in describing what is an app space and why would you need an app space. But in short, an app space is just the information that Ratchet-X needs to know how to find a screen on the desktop, find a specific window running on the Windows desktop, and extract or paste values from it. So this is kind of a profile of what an application screen might look like. That's what the app space is. The action is a collection of operations, such as, in this case, search Laserfiche, scan into Laserfiche, import into Laserfiche, copy fields into a Laserfiche document, copy fields into a Laserfiche snapshot window. Those are the collection of operations that are supported in the standard Laserfiche Action Pack. This is an important note to anyone a little more advanced. The Action Pack is essentially source code. So you could right-click this, open in the Action Editor, you could open this and make any changes you wanted. So don't think of this as a fixed solution. You can go in and make changes directly to that Action Pack, adding features or refining features as you like. Alright, so let's get started. What I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to load this MyCRM as a sample Windows application. This is just a regular old Windows application, and we're going to image enable it. Let's say what we'll do is we will wire this up so that we can scan W2 documents directly into Laserfiche, and that would be pulling information right from the screen. And then we'll also search from here. Okay, so the first step is we'll wire up one scan where we scan and pull data from this screen to scan a document. When that's done, we will do a search into Laserfiche to find that document. Those are two probably the most popular operations that the Laserfiche Action Pack supports. After you see both, you'll realize the pattern of what we're doing here. There's 7 operations, and each of those is a similar pattern. So let's see how we begin. We start by making sure we're on the Action tab in Commander, and we're looking at the Laserfiche Action Pack. We select it, and then I'm going to right-click on it. By right-clicking on it, it gives me a drop-down menu that includes Create App Space using Wizard. Now, this is a mouthful, but essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to use a very simple-to-use wizard that will come up that will allow me to integrate a specific window on my Windows desktop into a specific operation in the Laserfiche Action Pack. In a later video, you'll see something a little more in depth where we go a little further than the usual and we show the full flexibility of what Ratchet-X can do. But for now, we're going to use this very simple App Space Wizard. So let's get started. I click that, and the App Space Wizard begins. First thing it does is it looks at the action that we're working with. In this case, it's the Laserfiche Action Pack, and it gets a list of the supported operations. So the first operation we want to perform is a scan. So I'm going to select Scan, which will create a document, folders, and up to 20 template fields, and it'll open the scanning interface for Laserfiche. Let's click Next. The next step is where I actually want to target this application window and teach Ratchet-X how to recognize it. So to do that is a simple step. I'm going to drag and drop onto this window. When I let go, Ratchet-X says, okay, I recognize the window. Here's the particulars. Here's what I know about it. This is the information found in the title bar text. Some other information might include things like the process name and the class name. All of that is important so that Ratchet-X can find this window in the future. Now, one thing you might want to note here is that this application currently is pointing to a record for somebody named Oscar, but in the future it might not be. So I think we want to leave this piece out and just replace that with a wildcard. So I'm going to just remove that and put a wildcard in here. My wildcards can either be regular expressions or the very simple asterisk as a wildcard to mean anything. Now that that is green, it means it's currently finding and matching this. I get to define a condition here, an additional condition where this screen will only be found, Ratchet-X will only be able to perform this integration if, and there's a drop-down list of possibilities. You could say none, no other conditions. You could say if all mapped elements, and we have not yet mapped an element, we'll do that in the next step. If all mapped elements are found, or if all mapped elements are found and visible. Okay, now that's what it defaults to, and that's what we're going to leave it at. But what that means is Ratchet-X will only consider this window found if it has a title bar text that matches this, its process name and class name matches these things here, whatever that yuck is there. We've read it right from the window itself, and if the elements that we're going to map in a minute are all found and are all visible. Okay, that's the default, and that's usually the best way to go. So I'm going to click Next. And now we're looking at these are the scan-specific parameters that we need to pass into the scan operation in the Laserfiche Action Pack. So let's just go through them. What I would do is I'd select each one and I'd set it to the appropriate value. Let's start at the top with the caption. So I'm going to say scan W2. Scan W2. Let's do that. That's going to make my caption. That's the name that will appear on the operation. That's what the user will look at and say, yes, that's what I want to do. Click. Okay, so that's going to be the caption for this specific operation when it's presented to the user. Now, you're probably used to this. I need a lot of the particulars as to where to find Laserfiche. In this case, my server is called DevCore W7. The volume is default. That's fine. My repository is called Ratchetsoft. Path. Okay, well, the first question is, since we're creating a new document, where do we want to store that? What is the path on which we want to see that document stored? Well, let's take a look at the structure that we've established already in Laserfiche. So let me just load it really quick. I think I have to provide a password. So this is the structure we have. We've established some top-level folders, but none of them, or I think only one of them, may have a subfolder. That's the only one that has a subfolder. Everything else is currently empty. So the HR folder is currently empty, and this is the folder to get to the HR folder. So I'm going to just grab this, save myself a little typing, and in my path, I'm going to put this. I want to store my document in the Ratchet-Soft repository in the HR folder, in a folder under that called W2, and that's it. That will be a folder that Ratchet-X will create if needed. It'll create a W2 folder. The next question is document name. If I'm going to be creating this, I've got to give it some kind of a document name. Well, I'm going to call this W2, because that's its document type, dash, but I want to put something in there so it'll be easier on the eye. Namely, let's say the user's last name. Let's say I want to call it W2 and the user's last name. Let's say that, for argument's sake, that's what I want to do. In this case, since the last name is something that is determined at runtime, we put in a token here. Now our tokens are keyed like this. Now, as you can see, what I've just placed is an open curly brace, the word field value 1, and a closed curly brace. What this means is Ratchet-X is going to name this document W2 dash, and then whatever value it pulls out of field value 1. Field value 1, as you can see here, is another one of these elements that we'll be mapping, and we'll map that to an actual screen element. We'll get to that in a minute. So now let's look at a template name. I have a template name that I've created. I'm going to map that to the constant W2. That's the name of the template. Be very careful when you're naming these things to make sure you get them exact. That's often a confusing element. If you put in the wrong template name, sometimes it basically clogs the helpline when people are making simple little typos like that. And now we're down to this list. Let me just show you, get a kind of a larger view of it. We have these pairs of field name, field value, field name, field value. They go from 1 to 20. You can use a maximum of 20 of these. Now, if you ever wanted to go beyond 20, you could do that, but you'd have to go into the Laserfiche Action Pack code and make some slight modifications to handle more. Field name. Okay, well, the field name we're going to first grab is going to be last name. Now, I'm grabbing the name last name. What is that? That's the metadata field name that you'd find in Laserfiche. Let me just bring something up here real quick. I just want to make sure I don't get any of this wrong. I'm going to go look at an existing document. I'm going to just take a look at the W2 folder. The W2 template. All right, these are the fields that we're going to be copying in. This is the template we're using. It's called W2. I need a last name, a first name, SSN, email, and phone. Okay, so having that as reference, let's continue. So my first value is going to be the field name 1, which is last name, and the field value, the data that will be pushed into the last name field, we're going to pull from the screen. So I'm going to go to my field value, and I'm going to select. So what I'm doing here is I'm just hovering over this, and then I'm clicking and dragging this little symbol over to the last name field and dropping it. Okay? So by doing so, we've just selected an on-screen element. A lot has happened here. This popped up and said, okay, we've determined by inspecting it that it's of type text. More details on that in the advanced one. The connector that we're going to try is the standard text connector. And we tried it out, and it returned this value, Matasox, which is correct. So just by luck, that one happened to work. What you'll see in later videos is that sometimes you have to go a little deeper. There are other types of connectors that you can try. In some cases, we have to resort to OCR. That's kind of the worst case scenario where there's no way to get at that field in any other simple way, and we're going to perform a very fast screen OCR to pull that value out. But suffice it to say that you would basically try a number of these different connectors to see which one works, and if none of them worked, which is a rarity, but if none of them worked, or you had something more unusual to do, like some specialized formatting, you can drop right into the AppSpace editor, our full-featured development tool, to do whatever you wanted. We're going to show that in a later video. So for now, We've dragged and dropped and selected the field value 1. That's going to be mapped to the last name here in the template W2. The second field name is going to be the constant first name. It's going to get its value from here. That seems to be getting the right value. Oscar is the right value. Field name 3 will get its value from, that will be SSN, so the constant SSN. That value will come from the SSN field here. That does return the right SSN. That looks right to me. We're going to do email and phone. So field name 4 is going to be email, capital E, mail. And that value, I'll be dragging and dropping again, will come from one of these email fields. We'll take the personal email field. That's got the right value, so we're good there. And the last one is phone. So we'll put in the value phone. And remember, what I'm typing in here into these field names has to match exactly what appears here as the field name in the Laserfiche metadata. And that's going to get its value at runtime from one of these phone numbers. Let's take this one. Okay, that is the right value, so the connector seems to be working, and we are good to go. I don't need to apply any others. That's as far as I need to go. And let's get started. I'm going to click the next button to move on. And now, last thing I have to do is just provide some descriptive information so that we can recognize this when we see it. So I'm going to call this, first thing it's asking for is the application name. So I'm going to say My CRM for Windows, and the screen name is going to be called People tab. Now I say People tab because if you notice in this application we're currently on the context of the People tab. There are other tabs which would expose other fields and hide these fields. So I'm just letting it know that the People tab is the context where these fields are currently visible. So that should be it. I should be able to now just hit Finished. And Ratchet-X will go and create an app space for me. Notice that the first thing it did is it created this app space called My CRM for Windows Scan. That little green check tells you that it currently found it on screen. But if you look here, more importantly, it has applied what we refer to as the magic button right here in the title bar of this application. And when I hover over it, you'll notice it shows that caption I mentioned, Scan W2. That's what it's going to perform when clicked. So let's give this a shot. Let me close this window so we're not confusing anything. No, we're not saving anything there. At this point, we have no documents in HR yet. And let's give this a whirl. So now the use case is the user would navigate to this record, Oscar Matasox, and they would have a document that they want to scan, and they want to have that document, let's say it's a W2 document, and they would want to have it automatically indexed. So the metadata would be taken right from the screen without doing any typing, and they want to do that with one click. So let's show that. I'll click this magic button, and off we go. So Ratchet-X first drops a screen curtain, which is kind of what you see is that dark haze over everything, letting the user know that it's in charge, it's doing things for you. And where is it? There it is. It has created a document, and it has brought up the universal capture engine so that I can start scanning this document. So there's no actual document in there. It has just created the placeholder document. Notice all the metadata has been brought over for me. All this information is here automatically. That has been mapped from the process we just went through. Okay, and that leaves me just to drive the scanner with start scanning, grab a W2. There's my W2 form, and then we're done. Click Done. There's my document. It's all been created. And just as point of interest, if I go into HR now, there is a W2 folder which it had created. And in that folder is W2 Matasox. If you remember, we used a token to include live data as part of the document name. We could have done the same thing with the path name, which is quite common as well. Okay, so that's it. We've just created a document. Well, the benefit of creating a document is goes to anyone who scans, which is, some subset of users in your environment are actually scan users. Generally speaking, all of your users are going to be, from time to time, performing a search in Laserfiche. So we think that's a much more target-rich environment for getting real productivity gains, because you have an enormous number of users who will be, let me describe this use case, who will navigate to this record in your line of business system and will want to automatically jump to whatever W-2s are available in Laserfiche that relate to this particular user. Okay, so let me show you how we wire that up. Before I start, although you can do it at any time, but while I've got this window open, let me go perform a search. What I want to do is I want to say, if we're going to perform a search into Laserfiche to find that document, this W2 Matasox document, what would that search look like if I were to perform it manually within the search tool here in Laserfiche? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to select a W2 form, and there's many ways to skin this cat, but this is the way I'm doing it. I'm going to select a W2 and I'm going to say, look for the Social Security number that matches this. I'm going to copy this value here. I'm going to paste it right here. And I'm going to say search. Well, that does find me my document and only the document. This is the document I'm interested in. Then I'm going to choose Customize Search. I'll go to the Advanced tab. And once I'm showing the Advanced tab, you'll notice that this syntax. This is the syntax that anyone very familiar with Laserfiche will be familiar with this as its search syntax. It's advanced. But in this case, it's pretty straightforward. This is the exact syntax that is required to find this document. Now, what we want is we want to take this syntax, but that value is what varies. That's the value that's going to be variable. Okay? So I'm going to grab this for a second. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard because we're going to use it in a minute. All right, so let's go over to Ratchet-X, which is sitting down here in the system tray. Let's go back to the Action tab, where we see the Laserfiche Action Pack Action. I'm going to right-click and say Create App Space Using Wizard. So this time, I'm going to choose Search Client as my operation. Last time we chose Scan. But you'll see the process is very similar. First step is target the window that you're interested in. I just dragged and dropped on that window, and Ratchet-X knows it. I'll do the same thing here where I wildcard out the username, because that's also going to be an issue here. But now I'm brought to a similar screen that we looked at before, but the fields are somewhat different. What I'm being asked to map here is different, because now the operation is search. So let's start with caption. We'll call this caption search W2, search for W2. How's that? My server name will be the same as it was, which is DevCore W7. My repository is RatchetSoft. The search filter is documents. That could be folders if you wanted to search only for folders. But it's almost always this, so we just use that as a default. But now we get to the query. Well, this is what we were just discussing before. I'm going to choose constant so I can enter this value as text. And I'm just copying and pasting the value that we had created over here in the search window. But what I want to do to treat this is I want to go and find the variable bit of text, which includes just all that data. Be careful not to go too far and grab one of the quotes around it. But I'm going to grab that chunk right there. That's the actual live data. I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to replace it with field value 1, which is a token that will represent the Social Security number. Okay, that's what we want to plug in. So that's it. I now have my query, which I know works. And last thing I have to do is just map field value 1. So I'm going to drag this over to the SSN. Ratchet-X says, yep, that's a text object. We're going to use a standard text connector. This is what it produces. That's right. We're good. And that's it. That's all I need to do for this one. So this is going to perform a search, and based on the location, which includes the W2 folder, it will be returning W2s that match. So I'll click Next. My application in this case is my CRM for Windows. My screen is the People tab. And I'll click Finished. Just as before, Ratchet-X spins around and it kind of writes a file with descriptors so it can find this window. And then it places the magic button up here. Right? In the window there's a magic button. What I do want you to notice though is that prior, when we only had a scan function that we needed to do, the button itself was a little picture of a scanner. And when you click that button, we call it one click, it would automatically perform that action. Now we have two operations that we can perform from this context. So now the button that's displayed is the standard Ratchet-X button, but when you click it, it gives you a drop down of the two choices. We can scan as we did before, or we can search for a W2. Alright, so let's see. Let's get rid of this window because that will just confuse me. Yeah, might as well close down Laserfiche entirely. And let's assume that this is some other user. They've navigated to this record and they want to search for the W2 that relates to, I'm getting ready to right click. When I right click, you'll see that it highlights the field that it relates to. So now I'm going to say yes, I want to search for W2s. Click it. And Laserfiche is loaded. That document is found. Everything goes back to normal. That's the document we had just scanned. Okay, so what we just went through was we went through a wiring up, we call it, of a specific window on the Windows desktop, in this case my CRM, and we used our wizard tool. Okay, now we went through that didn't fight us at all, it didn't struggle. The application is what would be considered a .NET application. It's what we usually consider to be a well-behaved application, meaning as I drag and drop I can easily find all the fields. There was nothing unusual. What would happen though if, let's say, I needed to take, I have two fields, first name and last name, and that's what appears here on the screen, but that's not what I need in the Laserfiche metadata. In the Laserfiche metadata, perhaps I need a full name, which would be concatenating the last name, a comma, and the first name. And I had to do some type of transformation like that. Or what happens if the application screen itself is not, if that target application we're integrating is not a well-behaved application, and it kind of fights with me. Well, that's the real world of integration. The real world is applications come in all sizes and shapes. Applications are not all well-behaved. They're not all written by Microsoft. Very often they are poorly behaved Windows clients, and they don't necessarily easily display what fields there are and things like that. We have a technique to get at the data on a screen regardless of the level of sophistication of that particular target application. And those require a little more effort. The next video I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into those more complicated use cases. But for now, I think this is a good place to stop if you're not interested in going any further. And you can try your application and see if how well this wizard works. And if it works for you, then you don't even have to go and look at the more advanced ones. But what's important to realize is that Ratchet-X is a very deep product. It's not just this surface level integration that you've just seen always being so easy. It's been around for 10 years and is very robust and able to get at applications that are not this well behaved. All right, see you on the other end. Hi, this is George Weiss, CTO of Ratchet-Soft. This is the second of a two-part video series demonstrating how to integrate your application using the Laserfiche Action Pack provided by Ratchet-Soft. In the first video, we integrated this application, a traditional Windows-based application, and we integrated two specific operations. Scan, which scanned these fields here. It drove the scanner and used these fields that are displayed here in red as copied them in as metadata fields. And then we also did a search, which used the SSN and did a search in Laserfiche. I would suggest that if you haven't already seen that video, that's the first place to start because we're going to be building from there. So in that video, we integrated this standard application which presents very little trouble. It's a well-behaved Windows application. But we need to point out that not every Windows application that you'll encounter is in fact very well behaved. In fact, I would say most aren't. That there are challenges all over the place. Browsers like Google Chrome and Internet Explorer, those are often very well-behaved, highly engineered applications that run very well natively on the Windows desktop. But very often you find other applications that maybe they're developed on Java, built with the intention of being cross-platform, and kind of running on Windows as well, that provide that a Java application provides a little more, requires a little more effort to integrate. Or it just might be some other application, such as a green screen application, which we'll show you today, that basically represents the more challenging integrations that are often encountered. Okay, so these can't be neglected. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to bring up another application similar to this MyCRM. We have this legacy application. Okay, this is a terminal emulator application that displays the contents of an AS400 session. And you encounter these, believe it or not, all the time still. And the data that we're looking for is similar to the data here. We find it in here. But we'll notice that the integration options are fewer. So to integrate this, we'll start the same way as we did before. We'll go to the action, called the Laserfiche Action Pack. We'll right-click it and choose Create App Space using Wizard. So I'm going to just be repeating the exact same steps we did before. We're going to do scan. We'll integrate scan to demonstrate this part of it. So a lot of this will be exactly what we did in the first video. There's very little change. So step one is select that window. You see the green highlight around it. That's how I know it's the right window. When I let go, it brings me the information about it. Unlike last time, there's no information up here that will not be consistently available. This will always be there. So I don't need to do any wildcards. So I'm just going to click the next button and move right along to the next step. So here's where we have to map the specific parameters that are required for the scan operation in the Laserfiche Action Pack. First one is the caption. I think we'll call this scan W2. That's what we did before. The server we'll set to our server, which is DevCore W7. Now you should know all this pedigree information if you're familiar with your own Laserfiche environment. You're familiar with these settings. They're pretty much always used when you're accessing it. The repository, ours is called Ratchet-Soft. The path, now I'm going to just grab the path from right here. In Laserfiche, this is where we were storing those documents. That's the path that I wanted to go to. Define this path. Okay, so my path is good. By the way, just as an interesting point, sometimes people want the path to include information that is dynamic. For example, you might want it to include the last name or something. You might want to create a folder for a specific customer or a specific account or whatever it might be. That's also doable. Just as I'm going to create a dynamic document name, you can introduce into this string the curly brace and a reference to one of the linked values below, these field names and field values. So you could do something like that. I'm not going to in this case. We're going to drop it right here into that W2 folder. And document name. Before, I believe we called it W2 dash field value 1. So that's what we're going to call it, right? So what that means is the file, at runtime, we're going to take whatever is mapped to field value 1, which is one of these on-screen fields, which I guess is going to be the name, and we are going to substitute that right here where we see this token, field value 1. So the resulting file name will be W2-Matasox, if that's the last name. Okay. The template name we're mapping to is W2. And now we get to put in the fields that we want to copy to the metadata to index this document when we create it. So the first field name will be last name. First field value. Well, this is where it gets a little bit different, and I am going to drag and drop to select a specific field. And what you'll notice is, lo and behold, it's working, but there is no specific field that I can drag and drop to. These individual fields that the user sees by the eye are not real, quote-unquote, fields in the Windows operating system. Those are somehow being rendered by an engine. some kind of display engine. In this case, the display engine is the terminal emulator that's just drawing that. So as far as Windows knows, these aren't fields with text. This is just a picture that's being displayed by some engine, which is the rendering engine for the terminal emulator. So that presents a problem. So if I need that word Mattersox, what do I do? Well, there's a few options. Option one would be to select this entire box. Let's say this box here, which we know includes it. So when I drop, you'll see, well, before we were dragging and selecting fields with the type called text. Well, now we're grabbing this thing called client. Client is a type of on-screen field that, as far as Windows knows, is of unknown type. It's kind of like saying unknown. So we don't know what it is, but automatically Ratchet-X will attempt then to use the standard scrape engine. The scrape engine uses a technique where we ask Windows to repaint that window, and we watch what it paints. And if it makes any requests to certain Windows APIs, we pull the data out. So we're kind of spying on it while it's writing, looking over its shoulder, and then we can figure out what it wrote where. And in this case, it works fine. You'll see that we've pulled out the text from AS400, My CRM Contact, People 1. All of this, the text box is a little small, but if you scroll down, you'll see all of the fields and all the data we need are right here. So we do get all the data. The problem is we don't need all the data. We need a certain piece of data. So there's a couple of different ways to handle it. By default, the standard scrape engine, if you click parameters, you'll see we allow you to provide a regular expression pattern. Regex, if you haven't heard of it, is a very popular parsing language. So you could write some kind of a pattern here to extract the piece of data you want. There's plenty of information about how to do that on the web. It's a little rich for my blood at this point. What I would say is there's another way, kind of a common thing that we've created, a derivation of this scrape connector is another connector we call scrape delimited. Now, scrape delimited is something that we encounter all the time, so we realize there's a pattern here. So the pattern is, if it very often happens, let's use this application. If I'm trying to get to the field called Oscar, if I was to scrape this whole section, then what I really want to do is I want to get at whatever data comes after the word first, colon, on the same line. And then up until, sometimes there might be another label here to start the next one, or that might just run out. So what we do is we give you the ability to give us the delimiters. What are the values that we'll find just before the word that we're looking for? In this case, we're looking for last name. So what we'd want is we'd want to be able to grab all of this text here from last straight through to here. That will be what will sandwich it or delimit it. That will be on the left side, and on the right side will just be that. Right there, sorry, this field here. I can't really grab it because of the nature of that application. So to do scrape delimited, I'm going to go down here. This is the data that I pulled out of the system, and I'm going to grab last all the way over to here. That's what I want to match. When I find that string, I want to take all the data next to it until it gets to the close square brace. So let me show you how I do that. Now that I've got that in the keyboard buffer, I'd put in my left. Oh, I think I got that wrong. Hold on a second. I'm going to grab this again, looking for everything up to and including that square brace. I'm going to Control-C that to the clipboard. Go back to my left delimiter. That's what you'll find to the left of what I want to pull out. And to the right, I'll just find that, the close brace. Okay? Trim spaces, yes. All this stuff is a little more advanced. We don't need to worry about that. Just leave all that at its defaults. So now, if I do an extract here, I get just the value I'm looking for, Mattersox. So what's happening is this connector is receiving all the text that's available on this screen, but is applying in this case, there's a regular expression that's being used in the connector, but you don't have to worry about it. That's all being kind of covered for you. So this connector is just pulling out the pieces that are found between the left and the right delimiter. Okay? There's one way of doing it. Okay? There's another way of doing it. Let me show you how that would work. So that's the field value 1. The field name 1 is last name. Let's get first name differently. So first name is going to map to a field in Laserfiche called first name. And the field value will map to first name. Now, as we know, we can't drag and drop and select a specific field. However, if I can hold down the control key, watch this here, the crosshair. If I hold down the control key, you notice it changes to define a zone. So now if I hover over it, it'll say click to begin. Now I'm not going to drag and drop. I'm going to just click it. And after clicking, you'll notice my mouse cursor becomes the crosshair. Well, this lets me freeform over here and manually select a portion of the screen that I want to work with. So I'm going to grab from here to here, being careful, realizing that I need to make it bigger than it appears right now because the field is that big, and you never know, there might be more data in it for other first names. Well, what's happened is, just like it did before, Ratchet-X says, okay, it's a zone, so it's going to always attempt to use the standard scrape connector, which did pull out the right word, Oscar. Now, that seems a lot easier because we don't have to go through those steps of worrying about a regular expression or putting in delimiters or any of that stuff. The limitation of this is that it assumes that this box, so let me just show you, that's what we just drew. I clicked highlight right here, and you'll see we just drew that freehand. Well, obviously, if I move this on the screen and click highlight, it'll still move with it because this is being anchored to this point right here. Okay, the box that it's contained in, this relative offset is being stored. So we know it's this far over from here, right? Well, sometimes applications are dynamic. Sometimes a user could resize it, or they can go into their options and change to a different font size or something like that. That would mean this would not be worth it. We couldn't use zones because we can't always pull the same section, the same exact zone to get the data that we need. So you have the right tool for the right circumstance, and so that's pretty much straightforward. I'm going to do the next one the same way. I'm just going to grab now the SSN, and that would be selecting. I'll do the same thing. Hold down Control and define a zone by clicking, and then coming over here to find SSN. Where would that be? Here it is. And I'm going to grab my SSN. Okay, and standard scrape pulls out the value properly. We're good to go. So now I've mapped the scrape delimited connector is going to be used for last name. If I hit extract, that pulls out the right value. First name is going to be using the scrape connector. In that case, I'm using zones, so I don't have to do any regular expression or anything. Hit extract, I get Oscar. Then my SSN is going to be pulled from here, extract, and I get my SSN. So we're in good shape here. So that's all I have to do for my scan. I think I've got the rest of it down. Make sure my path is right. Make sure my template is right. W2, we're good. So I'm going to click Next. I'm going to say this application is my CRM for legacy. The screen is People 001. And I'm going to click Finished. Now, Ratchet-X is going to spin around. It's going to create a new app space that has all that information we just gave it and stick it right into the commander. This is what was just created. No, this is just what was created, this one. And you'll notice that now the Ratchet-X is able to put a magic button up here that says Scan W2s. So we've just gone through the same thing we went through on this other application, but because this legacy app is not as well behaved, we've used two other techniques. We've used a text scrape and then a regular expression or a delimiter to find the specific, to parse out the specific data we need inside. And we've used the zone scenario where we actually have a zone that we've got that is fixed, that we're just scraping the text out of a specific area of the screen. Okay, so let's see how this works. So I click the magic button and it all starts, and just like before, brings up everything. We're good to go. Notice the document that was created has the three fields we asked to copy in it. I guess I could go to here and scan it to scan something in, but I don't need to. I'm not going to. You've seen that already. But what's important here is, I don't know if it matters to you, but notice the data that's come in is in uppercase, because in mainframes very often that's the way data is stored in a single case. Well, that could be a problem, and that's another example of where, well, the application is not an ideal scenario. We need to do something with the application to make the data transfer properly. So let's say that in this case it was desirable to have this data converted to mixed case, or what's generally referred to as title case, where the first letter would be capitalized of each word. So if we wanted to do that, well, we can do that. But now we're getting a little bit more complicated, and we need to drop into a different tool. So let's take a look. This is the output of that wizard we just went through. This is the app space that we generated that did this integration. I'm going to right-click on it, and you can see I can edit it in the wizard. So I can reopen it in that wizard and step through and make any changes that I need to in that wizard. Or I can edit it in our full-blown editor. Once you go to the full-blown editor and save it, that's it. Can't be round-tripped back into the wizard anymore. It is now it's editable only in the main editor tool. So I'm going to open this up in the editor, and I'm going to make some modifications to it there. So the editor is a tool that has been around since the very beginning of the Ratchet-X product. It is a very robust tool. You can do anything from here. It's very flexible, and because of that, it's more complicated. The wizard was a very simple thing that we did in the first demo. We've done it in here in the second demo as well. But this is really where the rubber meets the road. To do a integration that's beyond just a trivial, simple one, this is where you have to go. Okay? So what we just created using the wizard was what we call a regwin. That's the definition of a specific screen called People 001. And we added a couple of snippets in there. We created 3 snippets. Now they're just called field value 1, 2, and 3, but we know they're pointing to first name, last name, and SSN. And what's interesting is I'm going to open up one of these snippets. Now let me just point out the term snippet we use to represent a specific element on screen that we can extract data from or paste data to. That's a snippet. Okay? So I'm going to right-click on the field value one. I'm going to say edit it. I'm going to highlight it just so I can remember what it is. Notice this one is pointing to the entire box. It's not showing me the specific field because this is where we had selected it, scraped all the text, and used the scrape delimited mechanism to pull out just the word Matasox. Okay? But let's say I want to force that value. If I test it now, I'm going to see the raw data, Matasox. Well, what we desire now is we want to be able to change this so that it returns a title case. Okay? Instead of just uppercase, we want to return title case. So that means we need to make a change in the connector. All right? So to do that, I'm going to drop into these connectors. Now, you've noticed before there's a whole bunch of connectors that we listed, and there's connectors that you can import into here that we've already got pre-built. These are the standard connectors that everybody uses in most Windows applications. This is the scrape delimited connector. Now, as you can see, there's source code here. Right? This is .NET 3.5 coding in C#. Okay? It can be as complicated as you want it to be, or it can be very simple. The standard text connector, which we use most of the time, is very, very simple, under 20 lines. Okay, very simple. We happen to select a more complicated connector, the scrape delimited connector. Okay? So, in this connector, I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to go in and take a look at the extract method. The extract method is doing all this stuff, and then it's returning this value. It's returning the raw value right here. So I'm going to add a little bit of code here. Bear with me for a second while I do that. First thing I'll do is oh wait, you know what I need to do? I need to Control Z and undo all my changes. I don't want to make a change to this connector. That would be wrong because I may want to use this connector in its native form later. So what I want to do is I want to right click on this connector here and say clone. So now I've made a copy of that scrape delimited connector, and I'm going to give it a different name. I'm going to call this scrape delimiter demo, just so I know. No, scrape delimiter title case. That's a good one. And now I'm going to make a change to this one. So first, I'll make some little code changes here. In my else, instead of just returning this value, I'm going to say, create a variable for it and say string raw equals that. That's my raw value. And then I'm going to use some code from the, I believe it's the using system.globalization namespace. Anyone familiar with .NET coding would know exactly what I'm doing right now. This is just like it would look in Visual Studio. Okay, I'm going to use the system globalization namespace, and I'm going to use a method that it has. I think instead of watching me code, I've copied this over here so I can make it easier for you. I'm going to put these few lines of code in here. This is what you need to do to use the toTitleCase method. Okay, so let me compile. I got an error val. Okay, it's not val, this is raw. And then I'm going to click compile button or hit F5. And now I've got it compiled clean and we're good to go. So now I'm going to go back to my people connector. And I'm going to choose, I'm going to edit field value 1. And instead of using the scrape connector, I'm going to use scrape delimited title case. Now if I extract it, I get the value not in its original uppercase converted to title case. Okay. Now that is an example of, that's a specific example where just case is all that's being altered. But it's very often the case that the data that is presented from the screen is not exactly the data you need in your Laserfiche metadata fields. You want to do some type of a transformation. The most common is sometimes we see fields in the system that say NA, N/A if it's not available and there's no data there. But that's not, you don't want NA put in your template fields in Laserfiche. That's a common one. So my point is, sometimes you need to drop in, and Ratchet-X has all the tooling to let you do that. It's very, very flexible. There's the easy side, the wizard side, but when where the wizard ends, this app space editor begins, and it gives you this kind of ability. So now we've just changed this field, and that's for the scrape delimited title case. And let's see, I think, oh yeah, this is using standard scrape. This guy here, field value 2, which is pulling the first name, is not using the same connector, so I'd have to do the same thing. I'd repeat the same action here where I'd select the scrape connector, I'd clone it, I'd change its name to scrape title case. I would add my little bit of code, which is using system.globalization. And then I'd find wherever I think it's popping out, I think that's here. Here is where it's returning the values. And I'd say, okay. Assign that to a variable instead of returning it. And then let's grab this chunk of text that I have from before, paste that right in here, and I think that should be good. So now I'm going to take the data that we would have returned, and I'm going to run it through this little bit of code to convert it to title case. Compile that, it compiles clean, and now we've got these two new connectors that we've created that give us the ability to handle that conversion to title case. Let me just make sure that that second connector works. So I'm going to bring up the snippet, and I'm going to click test, extract, and it pulls out Oscar, which is not right. Oh, because I have not changed the connector yet. I have to change it to, what do we call it? Scrape title case. That's the one. And it brings back Oscar with the appropriate case. So that's good. So now this one we can continue to just use the standard scrape connector because the SSN is just returning numbers. We don't care about case in that scenario. So now if I save this, save file, save, I can close this down. Ratchet-X asks me if I need to reload any actions. Yes, I do. I've made a substantive change that I want reflected in the runtime behavior. And let me just close this down and start again. So we already have a document in there, but let's go back and run it again. So what I'd expect now is if I click here, it should reflect those new changes, where you'll notice the data that's in there is now in title case, just the way we want it. Now, that didn't take an inordinate amount of time. We took an extra 15 minutes. The tooling of Ratchet-X was enough to give you that ability to do whatever transformation you needed. And those are real-world scenarios that happen all the time and have to be considered when you sit down to do whatever integration you're going to be doing. So to recap, we just demonstrated how to use the wizard to do text scrape and to do zones, where the zones are small regions that you define freeform. We described why you would use one over the other. Zones are only good when you know for sure that the fields are not going to be moving around on the screen. Text scrape is more consistent if you worry about the fields moving slightly. We've also edited one of the output of the wizard, which is just an app space. We've edited it using the app space editor. Now, if you want to see more details about the app space editor and learn more about how Ratchet-X app spaces work, we have a video that's specific to that, and I'd point you in that direction. You can find it on our site. And there's, I think it's an hour and 20 minutes of an introduction to how app spaces work. That's where we really get into the details of what snippets are, how to build them, and more. This was just a video to give you a sense of, from a Laserfiche point of view, what are the complexities that go beyond just the standard kind of demo drag drop. Okay, so I think that's where we will end for now. This is George Weiss. I thank you for your time in watching, and there'll be more videos coming. Feel free to send us any emails you have with questions, or if you want to see other videos, feel free to let us know, and we'll make sure we get them out. Thanks now.